to introduce Sister Betsy Huber for her external address. At this time, I would place the Grange at ease. Sister Betsy.
Thank you, worthy master. The National Grange continues to gain more recognition as a valuable grassroots source of information and influence in Washington, D.C. through the excellent work of our legislative department, Burton Eller and Sean O'Neill. They are a small but mighty force, especially on issues such as broadband deployment, healthcare, and agriculture. Joining with many other associations, we amplify our voice on policy issues that you adopt here at the annual session. 2022 has been a busy year in Washington, with both Congress and the executive branch taking significant actions. Last winter, Democrats' large proposal for social and climate spending, funded by wide-ranging tax increases, known as Build Back Better, was ended with Senator Joe Manchin declaring his opposition to the bill. The death of Build Back Better came due to serious lobbying efforts by a wide variety of stakeholders, such as the agriculture community, including the National Grange, who lobbied against tax increases which could have harmed farmers. Following months of negotiations, some of the original priorities of Build Back Better resurfaced as the Inflation Reduction Act, a bill which will raise an estimated $739 billion through a narrower set of tax changes, which will be spent on a variety of healthcare and environmental priorities, along with deficit reduction. This year, Congress also passed significant bipartisan bills funding billions of dollars of high-tech research and domestic manufacturing, tightening gun laws, increasing benefits for veterans affected by toxic substances during their service, and more. Outside of Congress, President Biden and the executive branch have made a number of significant changes related to issues such as the environment, healthcare, criminal justice, student loan forgiveness, and more. Outside of the normal lawmaking process, major events have occurred impacting politics and policy in Washington this past year. In February, Russia initiated an all-out invasion of Ukraine, which has led to significant spending on military and economic aid from the United States and allies, and caused shifts across the economic spectrum, including increased fuel costs and fluctuations in commodity prices. This past year has also seen major changes in American judicial policy, as a new Supreme Court justice has been sworn in, and a 6-3 conservative majority on the court has made its viewpoint felt. Major Supreme Court decisions on issues such as gun rights, religious liberty, abortion, and administrative law were handed down in the spring and summer, with their effects now being seen across the country. Looking over the past year, I've been appointed to several new boards as the National Grange is becoming more recognized in various fields. In addition to continuing on the board of SAY, Safety and Agriculture for Youth, and the FCC Precision Ag Deployment Working Group, I now serve on the Advisory Council for the Alliance for Women's Health and Prevention, the Uterine Health Alliance, the Alliance for Aviation Across America, and the board of the National Coalition for Food and Agriculture Research. National Grange, along with the Pennsylvania State Grange, are working on a partnership with AREC, America's Rural Energy Coalition, to formulate an educational campaign about the importance of agriculture and energy to those in urban America who don't understand. We're co-hosting a meeting next month in Omaha with numerous oil and energy companies and hopefully some agricultural organizations to develop this effort. 2022 issues in review. Agriculture and food. Over the past year, we've been active on cattle market issues, voicing our opinion on the introduction of several cattle market price discovery and meat labeling bills. The House overwhelmingly passed livestock mandatory price reporting and the Cattle Contract Library Act, and we're urging the Senate to pass similar legislation pending there. We were excited that the White House was holding a conference on hunger, nutrition, and health after more than 50 years, but then disappointed that we were not invited to the table. The conference focused on the nutrition side, not on the agriculture side where the food will come from. As always, we ask Congress for robust investments in agriculture and food research, especially for the development of technologies and practices that improve climate resilience and sustainability on farms and ranches. We again lobbied for allocation of full funding for the Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network. We were pleased to see the passage of the Ocean Shipping Reform Act to clear up West Coast port congestion that had severely hampered exports of agricultural products. Environment, conservation, and climate change. The National Grange strongly opposed a Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, proposal to require public companies to report indirect greenhouse gas emissions that result from their supply chain. That would require farms and ranches to report large amounts of emissions information, which they're not equipped to do. Last week, I spoke about this issue to the annual conference of apple processors, who are also concerned about it, along with many other agricultural groups. Soon after taking office, President Biden issued an executive order to tackle the climate crisis domestically and abroad. In it, he established a national goal to conserve at least 30% of U.S. lands and waters by 2030. An initiative commonly referred to as 30 by 30. This initiative seeks to reverse the negative impacts of biodiversity decline and climate change by protecting more natural areas. The National Grange opposes this order because of its intrusion on private property rights and being another heavy-handed, unfunded government mandate. Healthcare. In addition to agriculture and the environment, the Grange is greatly involved in healthcare issues. Earlier this year, we conducted a rural voter poll on healthcare priorities that showed rural residents prioritize transparency in the system, requiring rebates to be passed to patients at the pharmacy counter, access and affordability of treatment, and capping out-of-pocket cost share. The survey also identified several obstacles to rural mental health care. In October, we conducted another poll to identify cancer disparities in rural areas. Both these polls were funded by our partners because of our grassroots connection to the rural population. The National Grange has partnered with Rural Minds, an organization founded by Jeff Winton last October, to end the suffering, silence, and stigma around mental illness in rural America. Burton and I were so impressed by Jeff. What an amazing man, so passionate about this issue. It seemed like a perfect fit for the Grange to get involved in solutions for the rural suicide epidemic. Jeff spoke at our DC experience and the April fly-in. He featured Grangers on 2 webinars this year, and I'm so excited that you will all get to meet him here in person on Thursday. We hope that community Granges will host programs and be sources of information and safe spaces for their neighbors who may be struggling. Be here Thursday at 2 p.m. to learn more. In other actions, we urge Congress to pass the bipartisan Saving Access to Laboratory Services Act to prevent another round of Medicare reimbursement cuts. We worked to get co-sponsors for the Medicare Multi-Cancer Early Detection Screening Coverage Act. This would require Medicare coverage of a simple blood test that can identify 50 types of cancer that do not currently have any other screening tests available. This one simple blood test has the ability to save thousands of lives. We filed comments with the Federal Trade Commission on the impact of pharmacy benefit manager practices and the ability of patients to access and afford their prescription medications. We urged the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services to reconsider its decision not to approve Medicare coverage of a promising Alzheimer's treatment following approval by FDA. And we advocated co-sponsorship of the Protecting Seniors Through Immunization Act, which would make vaccines for shingles, pneumonia, and several more diseases available to seniors at no cost. While I understand that vaccine hesitancy exists among our members and personal choice is important, the National Grange encourages children and adults to continue following the recommendations of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention when it comes to vaccines. From the annual flu shot to COVID boosters and shingles vaccines, it's important to do everything we can for our health and the health of the seniors, children, and at-risk populations around us. The National Grange and Grange Advocacy have worked with the COVID Vaccine Education and Equity Project and other partners over the past few years to get information about the importance of vaccines of all sorts out to the public, participating in national campaigns as spokespeople for rural America. Our work continues to encourage members of all ages to have conversations with their doctors and other healthcare professionals about when it may be the appropriate time for them to receive the first dose of vaccines or the appropriate boosters. Early in the year, Burton and I had the opportunity to meet with Postmaster General Louis DeJoy to discuss the long history of Grange support of the Postal Service and hear of his plan for financial stability and service excellence at the USPS. The Grange strongly supported the Postal Service Reform Act, which passed last year, and no longer requires the Postal Service to pre-fund retirement health benefits, requires 6-day delivery, expands special rates for local newspapers, and requires congressional oversight. Right to repair. The Grange supported Montana Senator Tester's bill that would require agricultural equipment manufacturers to make their software, information, parts, and tools available to machinery owners so they can repair their own equipment. Telecommunications. I've been very involved again this year with the Federal Communications Commission Precision Agriculture Task Force, serving on the deployment working group. Just last week, we submitted our recommendations to speed broadband expansion to rural America so that farmers and ranchers are able to take advantage of the benefits of precision agriculture, both economic and environmental. After more than 20 years of advocacy, we are pleased with all the funding that has been allocated for internet access to the unserved this year. The pace of broadband deployment bringing connectivity into rural areas will expand fast. It's now our job to ensure that this funding is used in the best way to truly reach the unserved first, that this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity is not wasted, but is effective in closing the digital divide. Toward that end, we pushed for new broadband mapping to be developed by the FCC following passage of the Data Act last year. We filed comments with the FCC to support guidelines that will help ensure fair, equitable, cost-effective, and timely access to utility poles by service providers. We wrote to the National Telecommunications and Information Agency head, Alan Davidson, reiterating that new federal broadband funds are to be used to connect the unserved first, the underserved next, and then everyone else. We wrote an editorial published in Washington's AgriPulse newsletter that focused on the next steps to deploy high-speed internet access to unserved and underserved rural areas. Now that much of the funding has been allocated to the states for distribution, we encourage state presidents to establish a working relationship with their state broadband agency, which will distribute the new $42.4 billion in federal broadband funds from the Infrastructure and Jobs Act to local connectivity projects. State Granges will need to partner with their state broadband agencies to be sure the broadband maps are accurate and funding is prioritized to connect the unserved and underserved first. Transportation. This fall, the threat of a freight rail strike loomed over the agricultural world, a catastrophe that would shut down the food supply chain and cripple grain shipments during harvest. President Biden took action to prevent a strike, but with only half the unions approving the settlement to date, the strike threat is still very real. We joined the Agriculture Transportation Working Group 2 weeks ago to write, urging the president to again intervene. We supported the Freight Rail Shipping Fair Market Act to reauthorize the Surface Transportation Board, empower it to address inefficient and unreliable rail service for the U.S. commodities supply chain, and to assure the board has the necessary authority to ensure a competitive and reliable freight rail network to support the agriculture and food supply chain. We appealed to the board to take steps to lower freight rates amid high railroad profit margins and to ease supply chain shipping backlogs. And we supported the introduction of Senator Baldwin's Reliable Rail Service Act to better define the common carrier obligation of Class I rail carriers. Throughout our 155-year history, the Grange has been advocating for farmers' rail shipments of crops to market and supporting government regulation of railroads to ensure fair treatment of shippers. Our legislative events. The Legislative Department provided workshops for youth and juniors at the DC Experience in March with about 30 participants from all across the country. And just for congressional appointments for about 25 attendees. The Champions of Rural America reception was a wonderful event where we recognized Nona Baer, patient advocate, Sarah Wyant, founder and editor of AgriPulse, and Congressman Dan Newhouse of Washington. The fourth honoree, Senator Manchin of West Virginia, was unable to attend. Many of our Grange advocacy partners attended the gala reception, along with fly-in participants and the National Grange board members. This is a great event to enhance our profile in Washington, D.C. At this time, we don't know what the fly-in will look like in 2023, so stay tuned for future announcements. The midterm elections. Were the pollsters wrong again? It appears they were. Most political pundits of both parties were of the opinion that a red wave would elect Republicans to a 20-plus majority in the House and perhaps a majority of 1 or 2 in the Senate. That didn't happen. As of now, Republicans hold a razor-thin majority in the House, but might end up losing a seat in the Senate. What does this mean for the Grange next year? First of all, with different parties in control on the Hill, nothing in Congress will be easy unless there's bipartisan support. A Democratic farm bill next year in the Senate will differ from the Republican farm bill in the House. Reconciling those differences between the House and Senate will take a while. Senator Stabenow of Michigan will continue as Ag Chairperson in the Senate, while Representative G.T. Thompson from Pennsylvania, who is a real friend of the Grange and a personal friend of mine, is in line to chair the House Ag Committee. In other areas like healthcare and broadband deployment, we can expect bipartisan support on several issues. However, must-pass legislation on issues such as government funding, raising the debt ceiling, and defense reauthorization seem likely to face a difficult path this coming Congress, as members of the House Republican Conference have already signaled their opposition. All in all, this is likely to be one of the most challenging Congresses to navigate in many decades, but the National Grange will remain an active and important player on our key priorities. Looking to 2023, there's no shortage of issues that the National Grange will be working on. In the agriculture arena, the Farm Bill programs are all on the table as we begin to write a new Farm Bill. We're not a single issue or single commodity group, so we care about all the various titles and join with various groups to advocate for the best interests of farmers and rural residents. As inflation soars and a recession deepens, hunger and food bank demands will increase, and food security will be a worldwide concern. We see local food initiatives such as farm markets, farm-to-school programs, and local processing and butchering expanding to meet a growing demand. The food as medicine concept will expand as more research is conducted on the effect of diet, particularly on chronic diseases like diabetes, heart disease, etc. Conservation, environment, and climate change. We hope to see a final definitive decision from the Supreme Court on WOTUS, Waters of the U.S., clarifying the definition of navigable waters, which has been a debate for many years. Following the court's decision, regulations must be drafted to follow their guidance. Demands on the agriculture sector to capture carbon and cut methane emissions will increase and become cornerposts in sustainability debates. We will be there, making sure any proposals are totally voluntary. Farmers are the original conservationists and do everything they can to preserve the soil and other natural resources, so they will leave their farms even better for the next generation than they found them. As they are more and more squeezed by the economy and higher input costs, we hope the carbon market will be a source of revenue for farmers, not a source of more requirements and red tape. The economy. The economy will again be a huge concern in 2023. That dreaded word, inflation. How bad will it get? How long will it take to get it under control? How much damage will it do to the American economy in the meantime? America is suffering from its loss of energy independence, and energy prices will continue high for the foreseeable future. The cost of energy will squeeze food producers, businesses, and consumers. Unfortunately, the country does not have a comprehensive energy policy that was needed to prepare us for the transition between energy sources. States like Pennsylvania, Texas, Oklahoma have plenty of energy resources, but government policy, regulation, and politics prevent them from reaching the market. After huge deficit spending in the last 3 years on COVID-19 recovery and infrastructure, what sources of revenue will Congress decide to tap? Will agriculture, forestry, and land be targeted as they were in 2021? We need to be watching and be prepared to weigh in on the debates. In the healthcare arena, price and out-of-pocket costs of prescription drugs will still be top of mind, especially for elderly patients. Medicare coverage for doctors and medicines is lagging behind the cost curve for the elderly. Access to medical care and its affordability will continue to be a rural health concern that we will work to improve. New drug approvals may need to be pushed, especially for pneumonia and antibiotics to backstop those experiencing microbial resistance to current medicines. The Grange Grassroots Policy Voice. Since 1867, the National Grange has been the voice of agriculture, rural life, and small communities in America. Grange unity is built from the ground up as our grassroots Grangers set the policy priorities they advocate for at home, in their state, and in Washington. We appreciate and respect the time, energy, and dedication that local Grange members put into the policy development. This genuine grassroots policy development process sets the Grange apart from most other groups as we meet with members of Congress, the administration, and the federal agencies. Our nation's leaders know that when they meet with the Grange, we are bringing the grassroots, rural, and small-town voice to the table. Our primary job here this week is to develop and refine Grange policy to address the never-ending issues we face. So let's get to work and endeavor to present the best guidance for our legislative staff and our government officials. Thank you.